Hey y'all, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, and I'm here inside again actually with some Catasetums behind me and my IKEA grow cabinet, I guess you could say, next to me. But today I want to talk a little bit about springtime Catasetum care and the things that maybe you should be doing, maybe some of the things that you shouldn't be doing, maybe some surprising things about watering, as well as showing you some examples of sort of all of those, probably where your plants should be this time of year. And of course, it's mid-March when I'm filming this. So it is actually March 15. So hopefully most of your catasetums and their allies are growing. Maybe their growths are somewhere between this big and this big. At least that's how mine are. If you're in Florida, your plants are probably farther along. If you're farther north than I am, and I'm in central Texas, then your plants maybe haven't even woken up. But I've got a few examples of them all that I can show you. And then let's talk a little bit about watering. Fertilizing, that's an easy one. There should be zero fertilizing this time of year when your plants are this big. And maybe some problems and light. Let's talk about light. In fact, let's start there. Let's talk about light, day length, how bright your light should be. So there's this weird thing online where a few people put their catasetums in dark places all winter long as though they're bulbs. So never do that. That is really weird. It's not helpful, and it's a great way to kill your plants. Also, they need light. They need to know when to wake up, and typically day length is one of the cues that they use to figure out when to go to sleep and when to wake up. Of course, the other things are moisture, especially for dormancy. As the moisture and fertilizer go away, the plant starts shutting down. That's in the fall. Of course, we're in the spring now. But light is important. You want your plant to be experiencing day length changes. This time of year, the sun, of course, is getting more intense, and the day length is getting longer. So you want to make sure that you have bright light, like you can see here, if they're under artificial lights, or getting sunlight. I've mentioned a bunch of times on my channel that for my plants indoors, I'm actually using Casa light timer switch. It's automatic. It's programmed by my phone. And on my phone, I press one button that says something like set to natural day length. And it just automatically knows when your sunrise and sunset are happening in your area. And every day, the plant timer, the Casa timer itself will change, increasing your day length by a minute or two during this time of year, or decreasing day length by a minute or two during the sort of fall period. So it's really handy if you just set it and then you walk away, and it's great. So that's really key for Catasetums, is bright light all year round. The next thing that I want to talk about this time of year is watering. So as the new plant is putting out new roots, you really, that's like the worst possible time to be watering your plant. You can water before the new roots come out. In fact, I'll show you some plants that could use a little water. And this might surprise a lot of folks. You can and probably should be watering your plant during dormancy if the bulbs are shrinking. And when I say watering, I mean like a handful of times, maybe like once in January, maybe once in February. And if you see the new growth just starting and there's no roots yet, and the bulbs are starting to shrivel, go ahead and give that one last shot of water, and that should fatten the bulbs. And then that plant will have plenty of energy stored in those bulbs to push that plant through the next, let's say, 2 months of no water. It's important not to water these plants as the new roots are extending. If you get roots that are like this long or this long, or smaller, and they abort, that plant is going to have a really tough time. And there's a really good chance that it's going to take a full year for it to die. You're going to spend the next full year thinking that you're going to save this plant, that you're going to pull it through, and then next year everything's gonna be great, and then it just croaks on you during dormancy. So really, really, really want to emphasize the fact that your bulbs should be fairly fat as the plant is just pushing out that new growth, and so that it has lots of energy to push the new growth out and the new roots. And then you can start watering, and the roots are about 4 inches long minimum. If you have a big plant, you can let them go like 6 or more inches, and then water when that happens, when those roots are really long and ready to just start absorbing the water. Don't water before, because again, the roots could abort. Now, if you've started watering and your plants have aborted, that's tough. Like I said, you're probably going to spend the better part of the next year just sort of hoping that the plant pulls through, and then you won't really know until next spring, and it either dies on you or puts out a new growth, and you're good to go. Now, again, you'll see some folks online who are like, I water all year long, and great, sometimes it works. It can work that way for really complex hybrids, which are just sort of bulletproof plants, and they don't really care that much for whatever reason. But a lot of those hybrids do care and will rot on you if you keep them wet all winter long, or the new roots will abort on you if you water too early. So, maybe you're one of the lucky ones who for some reason has the right conditions for that, but most of us don't have that. So just don't water your plant. It's so much easier. It's not necessarily a bulletproof way to grow your plants, but it's tried and true, and it much closer mimics the conditions that these plants evolved with in nature and are better adapted to. And if you see those people watering online all winter long and they have great looking plants, great, good for them. Just remember that they are far and few between, and most of us have much better luck with a dry winter, the occasional watering to fatten the bulbs, and then absolutely no water as those new roots are extending. And again, you're not going to water until the roots are about this long. This is true for seedlings or for mature plants. For mature plants, this is sort of the minimum. You can go longer or even longer than my hand. So that's the long and short of it. Hey, if you found this video at all helpful, please feel free to hit the thanks button down here at the bottom of the screen. Any contributions, like $1 or $2 even, would be super helpful in getting me to other cool places around the country so that I can film different shows or even back to Brazil. As always, thank you very much appreciated. I guess the one other thing that I want to mention is temperature. These are they love heat. Love heat. So you want to keep your plants warm above 55 degrees minimum. That's the nighttime minimum. If your plants can get into the 80s, especially the mid to 85 to 90, that's really good for them. If you're growing indoors and it's only 70 degrees during the day for months on end, that's okay too. It's just that when you water that plant during dormancy, and you want it to dry off really, really, really quickly. So at 70 degrees, that's really tough to get that plant to dry off. So maybe you can pull it out of the pot. Don't cut the roots, but maybe pull it out of the pot and let it dry, and then you can put it back. You can run a fan on top of it. You can throw it under maybe with a heat mat underneath, heating up the roots and drying it out. Whatever you do, if it's hot in your conditions, great. It'll probably dry off appropriately fast. If you have sort of typical indoor conditions where it's 70 degrees or maybe even colder, if you keep your house cold, that's cold to me, in the wintertime, then you really want to worry about not watering your plants during dormancy at all, or having those roots dry off quickly, because that's when you do increase the chance for rot. Okay, I want to turn this camera around and take a look at some of my plants. Some good ones, some okay ones, and then we'll also run outside to the grow tent to see what some of them look like right now. All right, so I've got some Catasetums here that you can see in the shot, and basically, so this is one that I planted. This is Catasetum lucis. Oops. I repotted it and did a video about it recently. And this is one of the earlier ones to wake up. In fact, this is my earliest. And so you can see that it looks good. So here's the new growth. And I had two of them, but I snapped one off, unfortunately. It doesn't look like another one has popping up, but you can certainly see some of the new roots growing there, and they look pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this one. So if you are in Florida, maybe your plants look like this, or maybe even they're a little taller. So still, this is nowhere near the time to water quite yet. So this is a good looking one. This is Catasetum Chuck Taylor. And you can see a flower over here. This is one of my favorites, actually. This one looks like a delicious candy that I want to eat. So it's kind of a cool one. I hope to get this one awarded. I actually ended up chopping this one up quite a bit, and I just kept one for myself, and I sold another division off. I've actually got another division of it here. I'll probably get this one rehabbed, and I'll show this a sec why I'm saying rehab, but I'll probably sell this one later in the year once it's up and running. But you can see there's a growth here, and it's about this long, so that's okay. That means, so I repotted this one a week or two ago when the growth was about half as big. And so that was just as the new roots were starting to pop out. And I don't know that I'll be able to show you one of those today, or maybe I will on this one actually. But so these are two examples of what you want your plants to look like. You know, these are freshly potted. They've got brand new media. I use cypress mulch, which is a mixture of cypress trees and other hardwoods. And it seems to work really well. Of course, as you all know, I do the PET method, cypress mulch on here, and then an inorganic media here, which for me is EcoWeb, and then 2 holes punched into this spot here so that there's always water in the bottom. Once I start watering, these roots will go down and they won't dry out for many months until about October or November. But I also want to show you some of the plants in the grow tent because there's some more good examples of hopefully what your plants look like right now if they're happy and healthy and doing well. So I have some other plants that are more troublesome, I guess. So that Catasetum Chuck Taylor, I popped these back bulbs off, and it's super thin. I did soak this for about half a day, and the back bulbs did not fatten. So these roots are not super functional right now. And so this is an example of a plant that probably has enough juice to put out at least one more new growth. But these bulbs are really going to shrivel, and I bet that the oldest back bulb, maybe this one or this one, will end up being reabsorbed by the plant. One of them will probably turn sort of a yellow or an orange, and then they'll slowly shrink as those nutrients within the plant are distributed to the other bulbs, or more likely to the new growth that's coming out. And again, I won't water this one until, of course, the roots are appropriately long. And hopefully I'll have 2 plants and I can sell this one. Here is a small denticulatum by Ivany. It's more shriveled than I'd like, and it's not putting out a new growth yet. So, and you can see this top bulb is kind of wiggly. So if I were to put this one outside, it might wiggle, and then those new roots, as they're growing into the media, they're going to bump into the media and they're going to die. So what I'm going to do, I'll repot this one, even though the media and pot are still good. Or actually what I'll probably do is just get a stake, a metal stake that I can put in here and cinch it down, and then I'll leave it in here. But you see how these this bulb is getting pretty shriveled. I want to water this one time, soak it, let the whole thing fill up with water, and then tilt it upside down, dump that water out, and then let it dry. Once it's dry, this bulb here should fatten, and that should be plenty of room, or energy rather, for the plant to put out a new growth. This one is just Ivany. This is an Ivany with two really nice Ivanies that were put together to make another species, the same species. And actually, this one is just starting to grow. So this is a great one to show you for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has a new growth, and this is the best possible time to repot. So you can see the new growth is right there, and there are no new roots coming out. So I know that this plant will grow in this direction. So what I can do is use this same pot again. I'm going to give it fresh media. This media is still good, but I'm going to use fresh media. And you see how this plant is kind of floppy? Young plants will often have big spaces between their growths, and that can result in plants like this. So if this plant were older and it was closer to the media, I would leave this in its pot for another year. The pot size is good. The media is just fine. But since it's flopping around like this, what I want to do is repot this with this new growth facing the center of the pot and then dropping this into the media. So the moment those roots emerge, they're already in the media. Another way that you can get your roots to abort is if they're growing into dry air. If that air is too dry, they'll also abort. So these new roots don't like it to be too wet. They don't like it to be too dry. And both of those are situations, too wet or too dry, that can actually cause the new roots to abort, and we don't want that. So sinking your plants down into the media is one good way to overcome that dryness, as the media does hold at least a little bit more moisture than the surrounding air. So this is Galliandra Penny Lane. This is one that I got from Adam Driesward last year, and one of the things that you'll notice on your Catasetums during winter is a lot more pests if you bring your plants inside. And so this one, I don't normally have scale on my Catasetums, but you can see some scale here. So what I'll do is I'll scrape these off, and I'll probably spray this, probably with a spinosad or an insecticidal soap to kill these. It's not a major infection, so I don't think it's really worth getting too worked up about it. And then you can see actually some more. You see these fuzzy spots here. Some more, these are the younger ones. And they look a lot like mealybugs, and they essentially do the same thing. So this plant will get a good bath. And it's kind of unusual. This isn't the first Galliandra I've ever grown, and this is really the first time I'm noticing that it can be a mealybug slash scale attractant, because it's not normally what I see for the rest of my Catasetums. I almost never see pests with the exception of spider mites. That's really the only one that bugs my plant. So this plant has no new growth aside from the pesticide spray that I'll put on this. I'm not going to repot this one quite yet, because I don't know if the new growth will come out here, here, or here. So I don't know how to orient it in its new pot, which will be the PET method. It's currently potted in sphagnum right now. This is one way that I kind of rehabilitate some of my plants. So I've got 2 bulbs in here, and they had rot on the bottom of them, but the rest of the bulb is still good. And so what you can see is that there's plenty of juice in this one. This is a denticulatum, and it looks like it started a new growth, which I had not noticed until right now. You can see this new growth here is starting to swell. So I might be able to salvage this plant. In fact, I probably will. And what I'm doing is I've got just a PET pot with water in the bottom and then inorganic media on top. So this creates an environment that's humid enough to prevent desiccation, but it's open at the top, so it's not humid enough and still enough in the air to promote fungus. So anytime you're doing sort of a spag and bag type of saving a plant, one of the biggest problems you get is the whole thing is covered in mold. And mold doesn't typically hurt the plant until you seal it in a bag and then don't let any air exchange. And that can really injure an already plant, a plant that's already in trouble. This is a good intermediate where you have enough humidity to prevent desiccation, but enough airflow to prevent mold. And it tends to work. I've had good success. So I wanted to bring this one. This one is Catasetum tenebrosum by Colosum, which is now Yusef Niazi is, um, and it's one of my favorite crosses. And this is a good plant. This is a good example of a plant that can really use some watering. So I'm going to repot it too. So first of all, this pot is too big for this plant, but that's all I had last year when I repotted it. The media is still fine, so the media is not the issue. What is the issue is this plant is desiccated and needs. Well, first of all, then I'll also peel off these sheaths, but I want to repot it for a couple of reasons, and I can see two new growths. So I've got a growth here and a growth here. I don't know if you can see that. And both of these new growths have no roots started. And even if they had roots started, you can see the growths are kind of high up above the media. So I want to repot, I want to water it. And even if it had new roots coming out, that wouldn't be too bad because those new roots are way above the media and they wouldn't get wet. So hopefully these back bulbs will fatten after I soak this for about a day. Then I'll tilt the water out. I'll probably pull the whole thing out, and I'll take off these sheaths carefully so as not to injure this plant here. And then I will repot it. So a couple of things will be happening here. The whole the whole plant, the bulbs should fatten, and that'll give it enough reserves to push out two new growths for the next basically 2 months when I'm not watering this, and the plant will be fine. I'm going to get it in a smaller pot. This is kind of a cheap plastic that turns out, when I actually picked this one up to bring it over for this video, pieces just snapped off. So the plastic is less long lasting than the wood. And actually my table is getting covered in this plastic. So there's a bunch of reasons why I want to get this out of this pot. This is just kind of not a good situation for multiple reasons. And then I'll take this plant and I'll sink it down so that these older bulbs are probably buried a little, but the new bulbs coming out are sunk into the media, and those new roots will grow straight into that media. And this one is one of my favorites. I can't wait for it to bloom, and I'll show you all what it looks like. Ugh. So here are a few more examples of good looking new plants with new growth. And you can see the roots there are extending down into the media. The bulb's a little shriveled, but that's okay. I think that's plenty of juice to last this plant for the next 6 weeks. This is a single bulb Grace Dunn that I've kept. And let me see if I can get it to stay still here. And I'll zoom in one time sort of quickly so you can see what these new roots look like, extending throughout the media. So that's really great. That's exactly what I want to see. And that was one that I repotted last weekend. I have another one over here that I repotted last weekend. I can see the new growth is on the far side there. And I got one hand holding the camera and one hand holding the plant, so I'm not going to be able to do much with that, but you can see again, that growth is pretty close to the edge of the pot, which is okay. That will last me definitely next season. And if I'm lucky, I'll get a new growth out on this side, and then I won't have to repot next season. But if that newest growth on the far side is the one that decides to throw a new growth next year, I'll have to repot simply because the plant will be walking out of the pot. And here's another large plant with shriveled bulbs. I did try to water this one. It didn't fatten up at all, but you can see there's a new growth right there. And again, new media, big pot, should put on a really good show for y'all. And so these are the types of things that hopefully your plants are showing right now. And these are the goals. Your goal is for these plants at this stage to look like this. Some shriveling is okay. Excessive shriveling is not. And now, those of you who haven't done this very much kind of have an idea of what your plant should be looking like.